Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Life in the Wildlands podcast, where we discuss exciting opportunities with outdoor careers, share professional experiences, and provide advice to overcome the hurdles to federal employment. I am your host, Becky Schufelt. And today we have Bobbie Scopa, a retired firefighter, podcaster, and author. She's going to share with us how she started her career with the Forest Service and provide advice for those who want to pursue a career in this field. Thank you so much for joining us today, Bobbie. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Well, great. Well, go ahead and tell us more about yourself.
Well, probably one of the older people you've interviewed on your show, I imagine. I started my career as a seasonal firefighter, like most of your folks do. I started as a seasonal in 1974. And as a matter of fact, the hotshot crew I was on that year, we just had our 50th anniversary. I started as a seasonal. I was in college. Back in those days, you could easily work, go to school and work as a firefighter. And I did that. I continued with the feds. Then I went to work for the state of Arizona. And then I went to work for a fire department. I did that for about 15 years with the fire department. Got a master's degree and came back to the feds. And so when I retired, I was the deputy fire director for operations in the Northwest, and spent some time in D.C., had two different details back there, the last one as the deputy fire director for operations in the Washington office. And now I'm retired. I've got my own podcast, Bobbie on Fire, and hopefully people are getting some good lessons from the podcast stories.
Yeah, there's some great stories on there, and I encourage anybody to go on that is, interested in pursuing fire. Bobbie's got some great stories on that podcast. So go check out Bobbie on Fire. And so let's go back a little bit. So what really got you, what made you decide to become a seasonal in the first place? What was it about fire that kind of drew you into that in the beginning?
Well, I would love to know what everybody else's answer to that question is. For me, I had a love of the outdoors. I was already an avid backpacker. I had been out backpacking probably since I was 11 years old. And so I had a love of the outdoors. And, in the old days, there was a TV show called Lassie. And for a while, Lassie was a collie dog. And for a while in that TV show, Lassie belonged to a district ranger. And they lived out at a remote ranger station. So
that's right.
Yeah. Isn't that cool?
I remember watching that as a kid, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. It was. Okay, so that was a great show, too. Mm-hmm.
It was. And so
well,
that kind
awesome.
of drew me a little bit towards the Forest Service. And then, I don't know, I heard about firefighting, and it sounded exciting and sounded interesting. And so that's how I decided to get my application in.
Well, you sure made it up the chain to very high levels. And what's great is, some people skyrocket to the top based on their education, and some people take their time through their career to get to, those Washington, D.C. levels. So what was it that really, do you have any advice, or was there a strategy that you had with your career moving up? Were you always aiming for the Washington office, or were you really trying to take the ground level knowledge and bring it up to the top?
No, my career aspiration was to not get fired. There was my lofty goal. So, and that's not too far from the truth. The only reason I ever promoted anywhere was because doing a job, whether you're an engine captain or you're a AFMO battalion chief type, I always felt like, if I was always trying to influence change. I was always trying to influence change for improvement. whether it was for the personnel, whether it was for the processes, whether it was for budget. I was always trying to make things better. I thought in my mind, that's what I was trying to do. And I always thought, if I'm the AFMO now, boy, if I could just be the division, boy, then I could make some change. And then you're there, and then you beat your head against the wall for 6 years. And then, someone says,
Right.
the Chief 2 position is opening on such and such forest. And I'm like, wow, maybe I could really make some change if I went up to and was Chief 2. And then, and then chasing the desire to help make change. And I realized I was always one level below where I really needed to be to make change. And of course, the reality is we make change where we are. But that's what drove me.
Very true.
Yeah. I think that's really reasonable. And we get ourselves worked up thinking that, we can't make change where we are. We have to make change where we are. And I did make change in those positions that I was in, but it was that desire to help, that got me, at the Washington office eventually.
And can you explain really quickly what a division is?
Oh, a district FMO or division chief. So depending on where you work, and in some places you're both an FMO and a division, the same as an AFMO is a battalion. I spent 15 years with a fire department, and so those names stick with me. They seem more, I don't know, they seem appropriate to me.
So FMO, Fire Management Officer. So you were in charge of a full fire program on a ranger district.
Yes. So I did.
Is it correct?
I had a BLM. At one point I was working for BLM. I was a division for them. And then I transferred to the Forest Service, and I was division or district fire management officer. And then I went to a Chief 2, which is a deputy fire staff on a forest. Then I went to Chief 1, which is the fire staff on a forest. And then I went to the regional office, then Washington office, back to the regional office.
Wow. So when you were a seasonal, were you working on hand crews or engines? Like what were you doing? Because there's a number of jobs, that entry-level jobs as a seasonal that you can get, right? You have your hand crew, your engine crew member, and there's a few others.
Well, I worked on a hot shot crew. I worked on an engine, and I worked on, I don't know what they call them, like a smoke chase crew up in Region 1. I think they call them, a small squad of firefighters, little hand crew. So when I was a seasonal, I did a little bit of everything.
Oh, wow. So you got like a really good broad experience of, that maybe kind of told you which route you wanted to go in fire because you got a broad amount of experience.
Well, I did. And then in addition, when I was able to work past the fire season, then they would let me work for the range conservationist. And that's what I was studying in school. So that was really cool. I fought fire, and then I'm,
oh, wow.
Working for the range con. And that was what I went on to do then. When I graduated, I was fighting fire and being a range con at the same time. So that was cool.
So fire was a really good way to get your foot in the door, get introduced to the agency while you were pursuing your degree in range, which then you pursued further from that.
Exactly right.
That's great. Yeah. And I think more people need to know that, these jobs are seasonal. They're great because they're an excellent opportunity to test out different field areas that you might be interested in, or you could work for a season and be like, okay, no, that wasn't for me. I want to do this next year. And you've already got your name in there as a rehire with seasonal work.
I think that is such a great way to get exposure because everybody who starts to fight fire doesn't necessarily want to go on to do that. They might want to do recreation. They might want to do timber. They might want to be a biologist, or maybe they're getting their degree in biology or botany. I don't know how it is these days, but back when I was still working, I would say at least half of the specialists on the districts, the botanists, the biologists, the timber folks, they all started out in fire. Now, I don't think it's quite that many people anymore, but it certainly was when I was still working.
Wow. Yeah, and I do think it's worth people checking out how to get into seasonal positions. And, we talk a lot about that in previous podcasts, whatever, the resource area is. But fire is definitely a great way to make some money seasonally, at least in the summertime, if you are a student, and be able to travel. You get to go on fires all across the nation, which is really cool. So now I want to ask, okay, you've told us about your start and then the progression, with your career over time to the Washington office, but what really got you hooked in staying into this profession? Because it can be really hard. It's a field that's male dominated, and for me, I was one of a lot of men out there. I'm a 5'2", 110-pound female walking trails with all these guys, and things have changed a lot, which is great. It's become so much more inclusive with the culture. But I want to know, what really got you hooked, and do you have some inspiring stories or some great stories that you want to share?
Well, I've got a couple. I've got a couple really good ones, and I've got kind of a negative for full disclosure. But let me tell you some of the good ones.
Mm-hmm.
Very first fire I was on, and I think I may describe this in my book, but the very first fire I was on, I was on hotshot crew, because back in those days they picked up who they could. And so I'm on the hotshot crew. I got hired after they did the training. So I had no idea what we were doing. I had no idea what what looked like a trail to me, what did this have to do with putting the fire out? But the very first fire, we are cutting line, kind of a mid-slope line going up this drainage, and the fire is below us. And I'm just like, holy cow, I'm looking around. It's like, this is the craziest thing ever. And a helicopter flies over, and I'd never been that close to a helicopter. Oh my God, that's so cool. The sound helicopter makes when it's right overhead, and oh my God, it's exciting. And then and I knew enough to know that when an air tanker was coming in, and back in those days, the air tankers dropped right over our heads. These days, they drop way high, very much safer. But in those days, they were really low, and they were these old World War II bombers, and now they turned them into air tankers. Well, this was like a B-17 coming overhead, and the wow. Now they call them a crew soup, yells at us, "Everybody down! Tanker coming in!" And we all dropped onto the ground, and you hold your hat with one hand, and you hold your tool out with the other. And you're supposed to just hunker down and be flat on the ground, because if that retardant comes out and you get hit with a full load, you could get killed.
Not a good situation.
No, but that's how it was back in those days. But I couldn't put my head down. I had my hand on my helmet and my tool out, but I was up on my elbows looking up, because I had to see this air tanker come in. And here comes this air tanker. Couldn't have been more than, I don't know, it might have been 70 feet off the ground, close enough you can see the pilot, and the ground rumbles, and he drops the retardant right on the edge of the fire line, right where we're working. And I thought, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever.
Incredible. Oh my gosh, the adrenaline's probably just
Yeah,
pumping to
yeah.
you. Yeah.
And so that totally hooked me. Um, that was very fun. And it wasn't but a few years later I had graduated. I went to work for the state of Arizona for their forestry and lands department. And I get asked by my boss, and he says, "Hey, Bobbie, you were a firefighter for the Forest Service. Can you do a prescribed? We didn't call it prescribed. Can you do a controlled burn on so and so's ranch?" And of course, never being one to say no, I said, "Yeah, sure, I can do that." I had no idea. I had no idea what I was doing. But I had a super positive experience. I figured it out. And we started the program. We were burning chaparral and kind of just the vegetation type right below chaparral, kind of desert scrub. And I was burning
Hmm.
with no lines, with no prescription. I was just
No
kind of,
lines, no prescription.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And I became a pretty good burner. Um, and I was getting calls from other agencies asking for my prescriptions because they heard about my burning. I was like, my prescriptions? My prescription is I get a couple guys to join, this particular day. That's the day. That's the prescription. If I can get a couple people to help,
Yeah.
and they would
And
hold.
for our audience, for our audience, the prescription means there's a whole lot of scientific factors that need to go into for the agencies to decide when they need to burn. And this is before times that Bobbie is talking about. So this is interesting. I love this story. I'm sorry.
Well,
Keep going.
yeah, I got pretty good at knowing how to burn, and watching the winds, watching the vegetation, changing the vegetation, the slope changing, and the changing with the time of day, the conditions, the burning conditions as the day changes, and so it became kind of intuitive. I got to be pretty good at it, and so that was the combination of resource management and firefighting that I just loved, and that stuck with me through my career, my desire that we do right for the natural resource. Now, you want to hear
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just saying absolutely. Like I understand, but you have more to share.
Well, do you want to hear a negative?
Let's do it. And
Okay.
if it's not, yeah, then we'll just edit it out. But yeah,
Well, this
go
is,
for it. It
yeah.
might be helpful.
Well, because what your listeners may not know about me is that I'm transgender. And so I started my career working as a male in 1974, and it wasn't until about my early 90s that I transitioned. So back when I was working as a male firefighter, um, I had a hard time. It was a difficult. I was not treated well. I was bullied. I was kind of ridiculed. Um,
As a male?
as a male, yeah. Um,
Wow.
yeah,
So this is
because
before the transition.
before the transition, yeah.
And you
So
were still bullied as a man.
I was treated. Let me tell you this quick story.
Mhm.
I I was sexually harassed. Um,
Oh,
I
goodness.
I swore I would never work for the Forest Service again. That was my first
Mhm.
summer on a hotshot crew. Never going to work for the Forest Service again. But I was so much enjoyed the fires. I so enjoyed. Um, I liked so much about the job that by the time it was winter time, it was time to put my application in. I forgot all about the BS. And I put my application in again, but I just was going to go to a different district and not be on the hotshot crew. So, and so it was better. It was better. But even when I left the Forest Service and went to the state was okay for me personally. When I went to the fire department, I had the same problems at the fire department as I did on the hotshot crew. But it was just a couple of years later I transitioned, and so my experiences were a combination of awesome, and then there was a little bit that wasn't so awesome. But mostly,
Yeah,
it
because
was good.
I can't imagine, because back then you said you transitioned in the 90s.
Yeah, early
Well,
90s.
even when you joined in the 70s, there were very few women
Right.
out in the field. I mean, did you even work with any women back in the 70s and 80s? Maybe.
No, the first,
Yeah.
yeah, there weren't any, but they didn't like guys that they didn't perceive as being masculine enough either. So you didn't have to not, if you didn't only not have to be a woman, if you were not masculine enough as a guy, that didn't go over well either.
And you're working in fire. You can't get more masculine of a profession than that, in my opinion. But yeah, that's interesting to me. So you transitioned in the, what did you say, the mid 90s, early
Early mid
90s?
90s, yeah.
Okay. And so can you tell us a little bit about, your journey with that transition and how that might help some folks that are in a similar situation that want to get into this kind of career field but don't feel comfortable because
Right.
of the traditional, white dominated
Sure.
male domination of the agencies.
I think it doesn't make any difference what makes you different than your coworkers. It could be that you're a female on an all-male crew. Maybe your race is different than everybody else. Maybe it's your political affiliation is different than everybody else. Whatever it might be that makes you different, you have to come to work with some confidence that you're going to work hard, that you're going to learn,
Mhm.
that you're gonna do your best. Um, and if you do all that, I'm not saying everything's going to be great, but you got to start there. You got to start there. And so for me,
Yeah.
uh, I was good at my job, and I didn't really know it. I didn't know I was good at my job because I was always so worried about what people were saying, or this is, before I transitioned. Then once I transitioned, for me personally, my career was 10 times easier after I transitioned. Um, because,
Really?
yeah,
In in what ways?
well, I think I was more comfortable myself. And so I
Mhm.
wasn't worrying about what people were saying because my attitude was screw them. I know my job. I
Screw
know what I'm,
'em.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
you are you, and I think I agree with you. I mean, who cares where people come from, really? As long as they're there and they do a good job, why does it matter? And I love the fact that the agencies are now, and I love to hear that your experiences were much more positive from there. That's, amazing, because I was like, wow, that could be really, really, really tough. And I'm sure there were times that were for you, but even for me as a female in this field, I've had a
mhm.
lot of struggles, but none too negative either. It's just all about learning and working hard and trying sometimes to prove yourself and working a little extra harder, to prove that. But then at some point, you just have to really say to yourself, well, who cares? Like, I know I'm doing a good job. Why am I
Exactly.
trying to impress people?
Yeah, I,
So
I
that's,
agree. You got to have a little self-confidence because you'll get eaten up if you don't. Um,
oh, absolutely. And I think one thing I've taken out of your stories too is that you've also been a self-advocate for yourself. So self-confidence, self-advocacy, those are the two things that are going to make somebody really successful in this career. And especially starting in, it can be intimidating for a lot of folks, but if you can maintain those things and keep wanting to learn, you're gonna be successful in what you do. But you have to be your self-advocate, period. No matter who you are.
Exactly right. I wrote a story. I have a monthly column in the Wildland Firefighter magazine, and I had one titled "Oh Hell, It's a Prius," and the title refers to a story I tell in it that it doesn't make any difference how you're different. If you show up at a fire station and every truck in the parking lot of the fire station is a lifted Toyota Tacoma or some other kind of four-wheel drive thing, and everybody are hunters, and you show up on your first day at the station and you're driving a Prius, you're going to be the odd
There's
one
a
out.
flag.
Yeah.
There's a red flag there.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be about gender. It doesn't have to be about race. It's just being different. And so however you're different, you're going to have to stand up for yourself and work hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I think there was another story that I read from you, it was a while ago, but it was about leadership. And I think, the culture really comes down to leadership and what the person in charge is really willing to put up with or let go. And so I think there's a lot to be said about that. And especially when people are trying to get into this agency, like Forest Service, especially, there's been a huge culture shift, since the 90s or the early 2000s. At least I started in the early 2000s. Mm-hmm. And there's been a huge shift, which for the better. I think it's, making more inclusivity for folks of all different backgrounds and trying to negate all what used to be bullying and sexual harassment that used to happen, especially with women. Right. Earlier on, in earlier decades, and it's getting better. So I think that, people like you who are always trying to make things, like you were always trying to improve, which is what I think is great about why you wanted to keep, but you did it very, in a good strategic way, because it wasn't like you gunned to the top like a lot of people do. There's so many people that do that, but taking the time to understand from the field on up and make the changes. And yeah, the one thing you said is you have to make changes where you are. And I always felt, as somebody that, became a recreation program manager, which would be the equivalent to the forest fire management officer, is that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
You were talking about you were the rec program manager, and I don't know where you're going with that.
I think it was, it's about leadership, I think, and trying to understand that we need people that continue to take, and hold on dearly to the ground. But I always thought that I was probably making a bigger difference on the field level, like a GS9 and below sometimes, because it seems like the higher up I got, the more pigeonholed I was to make the difference that I sought out to be. Mm-hmm. But maybe I'm just not the person that can navigate all the political and agency policy, stuff that's going on. But you're lucky you're retired.
Yes, I am.
Well, I guess I am unofficially retired too, because I don't work for the Forest Service anymore, but I am still an AD.
Yeah.
But anyway, all right. So let's this has been, you shared some great information. So let's kind of move on to what do you feel is the most important to share with folks that are interested in wanting to pursue a career, especially from somebody with your type of background in this kind of profession?
Well, there's a few things. If you want to be a wildland firefighter, if you want to at least get some experience in wildland firefighting, I think you have to go in with an attitude that you're going to be good with whatever comes along, because you don't ever know what's going to come along. And what I mean by that is that you are probably never going to work another job that you take a lunch with you during the day, and that lunch consists of a couple frozen burritos and a ham sandwich maybe, and some juice and an apple or something. And over the course of the day, you're going to be eating out of that sack lunch, and then you're going to want some water, and it's going to be 100 degrees out, and you're going to be sweating, and you're going to be dusty and dirty, and you're going to want a cold drink, and you got hot water, and you got to choose from hot water and a frozen burrito, and
no in between.
No in between, and I mean, and there's going to be hard work. It's going to be some misery involved, but it's exciting at the same time. You have to be open to the hard work, the arduous conditions, and you got to be okay with that, knowing that the payoff is going to be you're going to be in great shape. You're going to make accomplishments. You're going to do things that you don't think you could ever do. Maybe you decide to go be a rappeller. After a couple seasons, you want to rappel out of a helicopter, slide down a rope. That's pretty cool. That's an opportunity.
Oh, I wish I would have done that. Sometimes that always helitack sounded fun to me.
Yeah,
rappelling.
I mean, I love flying around in helicopters when I first started out. I still did, but the more I rode in them, the more I realized, this thing, I could fall out of
a little sketchy. It's a little sketchy. It's really fun the first time or two, and then when you realize, like, okay, I've done that. Check that off my to-do list, my bucket list.
Holding that helicopter together, it's like, how in the world does this thing stay up in the air? But
but it's so exciting when you're in it, though.
And there's so many cool things that you can do. So, it's like there's a payoff. It's not as hard work to work, get a job working at Lowe's. That's not as hard of a job, but the payoff isn't there either. As an example, I always use the example, if you were a manager at the Ace Hardware store, you always would know what you were going to be doing Monday morning when you went into the store. Well, it's not that way when you're a wildland firefighter. You have to be prepared to say, okay, hey, we're getting dispatched. We're leaving in the morning. We're going to, South Carolina. That stuff happens.
Certain level of dedication that you have to commit to when you take these kind of positions. So, Bobbie, I really am interested for our audience to hear more. So I had, introduced Bobbie as an author. She's got a book, and I want you, Bobbie, to talk a little bit about it and where people can buy it, because I think people would benefit from reading this book and sharing your stories.
Well, the book is called Both Sides of the Fire Line, and that, of course, is reference to my having transitioned mid-career. And the book is a combination of things. It's not just about firefighting, and it's not just about my personal life. It has a lot of my personal life, but it also has a lot of fire stories. I'm proud to say that there's enough leadership lessons in the book that the Seattle Fire Department last summer required it to be read by those folks who were testing for the lieutenant's exam. So to become a lieutenant at the Seattle Fire Department, you had to read my book. And it's
wow, that's really cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was pretty proud of that because it's got a lot of leadership lessons in it. And for me, I've read a lot of leadership books, and they're great. Many of them are great. I learn through storytelling, and if people can listen to a story and think about it and take away a lesson, and they do that when they're listening to my podcast or my stories in my book, then I feel really good when that happens, and I hear it does. So the book is it's published by Chicago Review Press. You can get it online. You can order it at a bookstore. So I'm proud of the book in that I think it's making a difference in people's lives, because I say that because I'm getting emails from people who say it's making a difference in their family.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, highly recommended, Both Sides of the Fire Line by Bobbie Scopa. Go check it out on Amazon. All right. Well, Bobbie, that's all the time we have today. Thank you so much. This has been an incredible interview with you, and I just appreciate your time and all your story sharing. I want to hear more. Maybe we'll have you back on for episode 2.
All righty. Well, thanks very much for having me, Becky.
For more stories about outdoor careers, subscribe to the Life in the Wildlands podcast, where I will be interviewing outdoor professionals to discover exciting opportunities in outdoor careers, share professional experiences, discuss the hurdles to federal employment, and provide advice on how to overcome these challenges. And if you're interested in outdoor jobs and don't know where to start, or if you already are a federal employee with the outdoor career that's struggling to make it to the next level in your career development, Life in the Wildlands can help you on your journey. Check out our career counseling and federal resume development services at www.lifeinthewildlands.com or call 406-848-1660.